Welcome, everyone. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Colleen Zawadzki, and this is my friend.
I'm Tarki Heath. And you may remember Ms. Zawadzki and I from the Conservation Field Days. And so it's good to see everyone again.
Today, we're going to be talking about clean, drain, and dry, how you personally can help stop the spread of aquatic invasive species. We are delighted to be at the Cortland County Water Festival this June of 2021. Before we begin the presentation, we'd like you to consider some of the vocabulary we're going to be using today. Alien, something that comes from another place. Invader, something that comes in, takes over, and dominates. Aquatic comes from the root word aqua, having to do with water. Species, a type of something. An ecosystem, a community living together.
So we are really fortunate to be living in New York State. There's water everywhere. And fresh water, which is very unique. Now, you know, water is essential for life. We drink it, we use it for bathing, we use it in many, many important ways and couldn't live without it. Around New York State, we have several lakes and reservoirs, 2 Great Lakes, part of Lake Ontario and part of Lake Erie. And these wonderful Finger Lakes are right here like a little necklace in the center of the state. And where I'm sitting right now is on the edge of the Finger Lakes on Song Lake, and Ms. Zawadzki is over at Tully Lake. Now there's also 70,000 miles of rivers and streams, and it's hard to put that into context. So when we'd like to think of it this way, if you were to take those streams and rivers and put them end to end to end and keep going and wrap them around the center of the earth, you'd go once, and then you would go twice, and you'd almost make it around a 3rd time. That is a lot of fresh water. And we want to be good stewards of that water, and that's what we're talking about today. So we go to waters to recreate, fishing, swimming, boating, but we don't live in the water. And so it makes our relationship with the water a little bit different than for those animals that actually live there. This little picture shows this young man with a pole in the water going fishing, which is something that many of us like to do. But so do the herons, and they depend on the fish for their livelihood. We could live without the fish, the herons cannot. And that's true for many of the other animals that you see in this picture. There's a lot of activity below the surface of the water that we don't see. And that includes some of these microscopic plants and animals. These are microscopic pictures of paramecium and others. These are just some of the weeds. These are not microscopic. These are just straight on pictures of some of the weeds that also are necessary part of that ecosystem. And so let's talk about an ecosystem for a minute. An ecosystem is a unit in balance. There's some sharing of resources. There's some competing for resources. And we often refer to those as the predators and their prey. And if you look at this picture, I'll bet you could see at least a couple of predators and their prey. For example, the osprey and the fish, or probably the human and the fish competing, maybe even for the same fish. And then we see this bug over here, this little mosquito, and that's good food for maybe a frog, but they can be irritating. So what happens in an ecosystem when something comes in and dominates, like the mosquito here? It's taken over. It's going to make it very uncomfortable for this man to stay fishing. And we've all been exposed to some kind of ecosystem experience where something has come in, usually bugs, and they take over or dominate. But weeds can dominate an ecosystem, and so can certain animals.
In this slide, you'll see these are examples of animals and plants that are taking over the ecosystem. We call them aquatic, from the root word aqua, invasive, coming in and taking over and dominating species. Can you think of any others? You'll see Eurasian milfoil that came into Tully Lake and took over, and that affects plant life, other plants. It affects our fishing. You'll see those zebra mussels that Mrs. Heath has on Song Lake. Those came in a few years ago and those took over as well. So those dominated and invaded.
By the way, this is not Song Lake. We do have them, but they don't look quite this bad.
Thank you for pointing that out, Mrs.
Just wanted to point that out. Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you did. We're going to watch a video together. It's a little more than 7 minutes long. We really like it. It's called The Silent Invaders. That's going to show you lots of examples of aquatic, invasive plant and animal species coming in. As we watch that, I would like you to think of 2 questions. What bothered you most as you watched that movie? And what can you do as an individual to help keep that from happening or to make it less severe? There's a little teaser there. You're going to see a sea lamprey coming into Cayuga Lake, and let's watch it together.
This small Minnesota lake is normally quiet and serene. But today, 2 huge machines break the silence during this seasonal ritual. These mechanical harvesters are here to chop through the massive amounts of invasive weeds that are choking this lake. Eurasian water milfoil is a problem that won't go away. It's expensive to keep under control and can spread from lake to lake like a virus.
If you transfer a fragment of milfoil from one lake to another, you could start a new population.
Just a few miles away, Chip Welling from Minnesota's DNR is examining the milfoil in Lake Minnetonka, one of Minnesota's largest of its 10,000 lakes. Eurasian water milfoil was first discovered in this lake in 1987. By 1999, it had spread to 100 other lakes. Today, the weed grows in over 250 Minnesota lakes. It's a problem that's not only spreading across this state, but the entire continent.
This plant can put a lot of stems at the water's surface, and then the stems branch at the surface and form mats. And that's the principal problem that most users associate with Eurasian water milfoil.
It'll make a mat on there that you swear you could walk on.
Now we got to chew our way through the weeds, and we're not making it. It's a blanket that if you want to get a boat through it, you have a heck of a hard time. I can't back a boat out through it.
This nasty weed is not only a nuisance for boaters and anglers, it's also smothering important native vegetation in thousands of North American lakes.
Oh, that we don't know how it got here exactly, but we certainly have evidence that boaters can move the plant, and for that reason, we focus a lot of our efforts on educating boaters and getting them to clean all the plants from their equipment before they leave the lake.
Got weeds under here.
Cleaning, draining, and drying boats every time they come out of the water can prevent this aquatic hitchhiker known as Eurasian water milfoil from infesting even more lakes. As boaters and anglers, you could, without even knowing it, be part of the problem. Instead, become part of the solution in the daily battle against the silent invaders. This strange-looking fish, with its big head and frog-like eyes, has invaded North America's Great Lakes. The round goby hitchhiked its way from Europe aboard the ballast waters of ocean-going ships. And as with any aquatic species that are not native to our lakes, gobies compete with the fish that are.
One of the first things that they've done is they have eliminated essentially 3 species, groups of fish.
Sculpins, log perch, and darters have not survived the invasion of the round goby. Gobies compete with native species for food, drive them from their spawning areas, and even eat their eggs. They spawn several times from May through August, and once these bullies move into the neighborhood, their population explodes. Since game fish, like smallmouth bass, have learned to eat gobies, some anglers are now using them for bait. David Jude suspects it was an angler who inadvertently planted the new species to Michigan's Flint River and changed the future of the ecosystem here forever.
These fish weren't here, and now we've got 60–70% of the population is around gobies.
Gobies are popular bait now, and using gobies for bait, I don't have an issue with it as long as you're not moving them. Moving fish not only can introduce new species, but you can spread diseases, and this is something we've seen frequently across the Great Lakes, across North America, and across the world.
The irony is, although smallmouth bass eat gobies, gobies in turn raid the bass nests and consume their eggs. Because they are such voracious egg eaters, some professional anglers believe that fishermen should not lure the smallmouth bass off its nest during the spawning season.
Watch here, we've got a goby coming in from the right.
Okay.
Okay, and as soon as the male chases him, a goby will come in again from the other side, but the male makes it back in time to chase it away. Those gobies would start to swarm into the nest, and within 15 minutes, they could consume every offspring.
The population of the bottom feeders is so dense in some areas that fishing for some species, like walleye, can be a real challenge.
As soon as that bait gets to the bottom, boy, it's just boom, 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 boom. I mean, just instantaneously when that bait gets to the bottom, they're there.
Although round gobies are providing meals for some predator game fish, their presence may be doing more harm than good. And as scientists continue to study the impact of the round goby, it's not so much what they do know that concerns them, it's what they don't know. And the role that anglers play in this continuing saga is all part of the never-ending battle with the Silent Invaders. There's something therapeutic about the sounds of water splashing against the shore. But all is not well beneath these tranquil waves. Invasive zebra and quagga mussels are infecting many of our lakes in ways never before experienced or even imagined. Thousands of these invaders drop to the floor each time commercial fisherman Jeff Weborg releases his gill nets into Lake Michigan.
It's hard to imagine, but our scientist at NOAA who studies life on the bottom has estimated that there are over 4 quadrillion mussels on the bottom of the lake.
These destructive mussels blanket the floor of big and small lakes alike. They have invaded 20 states, lurking in hundreds of inland lakes and 6 major rivers. And they stick themselves to everything.
So if you take a look at a pipe that mussels have entered, now you've got a problem.
Utility pipes and machinery often get clogged with massive amounts of sticky mussels, and it's costing us millions.
Right now, it's probably between 15 and 20 million a year to control them at the pipes.
But that's only part of the problem.
They can change the ecosystem in ways you don't want the ecosystem changed.
Hungry zebra and quagga mussels are literally sucking in plankton, a critical part of the food chain and necessary for the survival of game fish. And the mussels have a voracious appetite.
A zebra mussel the size of my thumb can filter a liter or roughly a quart of water a day.
The only way these invasives can get into a lake is when a recreational boater or angler inadvertently puts them there. When traveling from one body of water to another, they either forget or don't know how to rid their boats of microscopic larvae.
Those larvae are virtually invisible to the naked eye. There's about 100 zebra mussel larvae in this vial.
The only prevention method is to clean, drain, and dry your boat every time you take it out of the water.
Make sure that you don't move water of any kind from one body of water to another. That means the bait buckets and the live wells and anything else that might be contained in your vessel.
It's the only way to stop these invasive aquatic hitchhikers, known as the Silent Invaders.
So the question we wanted you to consider as you watch that video is, what can we do? What can an individual do or a family do? Well, probably the most important thing we can do is to don't let them hitch a ride and look at all the different ways they can come into our ecosystem. First of all, they can come in on our boats and fishing gear, which you saw in the video, and you see that picture that Mrs. Heath is pointing to. Those weeds are hanging off of that boat. boat. And if that boat goes from one lake to another without cleaning, draining, and drying, those weeds will be passed on to the other lake. People have them actually in their hiking and camping equipment. And they need to make sure when they come back from hiking or fishing on another lake that they clean that off, they let it dry, and then they make sure that it's safe. People don't realize that even dogs and other pets and even Canada geese can have particulate pieces, small pieces of weeds stuck in their fur. So when a dog goes swimming from one lake to another after that beautiful swim, give the dog a bath, make sure we clean that dog off, and then we dry it off. And finally, you'll see there is a picture of purple loosestrife. That beautiful plant came in originally as a landscaping beautiful thing that people were planting in their lawns. Some people actually still do try to plant it, but it is highly invasive and it will take over the ecosystem. Next slide.
I just want to point out one thing. We didn't talk much about this. So anglers, they're wonderful stewards of our lakes and our streams, and they can also be carriers of microscopically small invaders like spiny water flea. We didn't show you a picture of that this time, but spiny water flea can come in on the fishing lines from anglers. So it's really important to address that as well. And finally, sometimes, we'd love to have living things in our house, and aquariums are great. They provide a nice peaceful source for us, but there are invasive plants and even some of the fish. So we want to be sure that if we are getting rid of plants or fish from an aquarium, we don't dump them into our toilets, or even, and certainly not into a lake or a stream. Yep. So we have to put them in the garbage.
Yes,
okay?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's look at this slide, because we can stop those aquatic hitchhikers by really checking very closely for visible plant and debris, cleaning and draining your boat equipment, and then let everything dry out before it goes into the next water body. And you can see that gentleman there is checking the propeller, and you're checking the live and bait wells. Definitely the rollers, the wheels, anything that has any plants that are hanging from it.
So clean, drain, and dry your watercraft and your fishing gear.
Don't let them ever hitch a ride from one lake to another.
Okay, thank you.
And we would like to thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you all. Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you in person, perhaps in a year, so we can answer your questions and talk to you. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.